Another native tribe, again, to kind of suggest the difference here, is an example of the Lakota Sioux, from the plains this time. The Lakota conceived of a world, a universe permeated by Wakan. This is Ashe, Manu. But eventually, by the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, because of contact, they started talking about Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, the Creator. This is the Supreme God. So you have the Supreme God, the Great Spirit here. You also have the very important sacred space. The Lakota lived in the Black Hills, which is parts of North and South Dakota. This is the land that is very sacred. And of course, like most Native Americans, did not consider the land to be owned. And you could not own land like Westerners thought of owning land. And of course, that made a lot of these interactions between European powers and natives difficult, because here are the Europeans believing that they are buying ownership of the land by providing gifts, but the Native Americans aren't understanding it that way, right? They're not seeing it that way. So they often signed these treaties not understanding completely what the Westerners meant. The United States in 1872 made a treaty with the Lakota that was meant to protect the Black Hills as their land, until silver was discovered there in 1874. And then that quickly changed as well. Not surprisingly, very important among the Lakota were the buffalo. They were Wakan, very holy. Now, in this case, though, there wasn't as much of a prohibition against eating buffalo. You could eat buffalo, but there was still a holiness to it. So you had to approach the killing, the hunting of buffalo in very important ways. And by hunting, eating, and then using bones for tools and all the other things, you probably remember from elementary school, right? They used all the parts of the buffalo. The idea is you're tapping into Wakan to do this. Another important connection with the spiritual world was through the use of visions, or the seeking, the questing after visions. And so people, usually young males, would go off from the tribe to seek these transformative encounters and to try and find this vision that was believed to guide the rest of their life. But the vision wasn't just meant for the individual. Often those visions had an important component for the community as well. Of course, connected with the Black Hills and with power is the belief of this connection between the land and humanity. Human beings belong to the earth, not the other way around. Now, the concept of Mother Earth that gained so much connection with ideas of Native Americans was really something that came after colonialism. But this idea of the earth and humanity being connected is a very important ancient view. Another common practice among the Lakota was the use of the sweat lodge. Sweat lodges were places for purification, especially prior to vision quests. And so they would construct a lodge with an opening toward the east, the sunrise, the source of all power. Right outside the lodge, stones would be heated up as hot as they could in a fire, and then taken into the lodge. And then people would sit in the lodge and experience this kind of dry heat, and the sweat would be bringing out all the impurities of the body, so to speak. And so prior to certain rituals, prior to warfare, it was expected that people would undergo this experience. Rather interesting example of a Lakota holy man is a man named Black Elk. Grew up among the Lakota, as you can see there from his dates. lived in the latter part of the 19th century into the early 20th century. We predominantly know about black elves because of the interest of an ethnographer named John Neihardt, who travels to the West in the 1930s in the late 1920s, 1930s, to try and find a Native American. And remember, this is late 19th century, early 20th century. Indians have been moved to reservations, are dying off, or being mainstream. Neihardt wants to find someone that he thinks is going to be an authentic Indian. And he meets Black Elk and writes down Black Elk's life story up to that point. Writes about the vision that Black Elk received as a young boy, and writes out of this the book Black Elk Speaks, which starts off with the words Black Elk Speaks, and then is these conversations that Black Elk has. The 1930s, it had very positive reviews, but it doesn't become very successful. In the 1960s, however, it's reissued and becomes very popular, not only among people interested, outsiders interested in Native traditions, but also among Native Americans trying to reach back to their traditions. We'll talk more about that on Thursday. One of the things that comes out of Black Elk Speaks, of course, is veneration of the Great Spirit. But one of the things that Black Elk Speaks kind of distorts is that it cuts out all the references that Black Elk made to his extensive knowledge of the white world. He was well-traveled, to the fact that he was Catholic, and he had converted to Catholicism. That's completely left out of Black Elk Speaks. And so all of that is ignored to focus on this authentic Indian, as Neihardt is trying to present. You say, okay, how do you know that's left out? Well, when Neihardt died, he left all of his transcripts of these discussions he had with Black Elk that talk about all these things that aren't in the book. And so that's how we know about his Catholicism. But the main point of Black Elk Speaks and Black Elk's life is this vision that he had at the age of 9. This seems to be, despite his conversion to Catholicism, seems to be the guiding force in his life. And so as he converts to Catholicism, he's understanding a lot of Catholicism through this vision. In this vision, he is taken into a world of clouds. Right? He's 9 years old, he gets sick, and these two heavenly messengers come to him. They take him to a world of clouds where he enters a rainbow teepee. And that's how he describes it. And in there he meets the 6 grandfathers. The 6 grandfathers in Lakota tradition are associated with the 4 cardinal directions, right, north, south, east, west, as well as up and down. They provide him with guidance, right? Here's the direction of your life, as well as different gifts that are meant to help him preserve his tribe, give him a destiny, to really focus on the hoop of his people. And like other traditions, and indigenous religions and not, the center of the world is wherever you live. And so the 6 grandfathers are talking about the center of the world is the plains. They also tell him that he is to perform a horse dance, and that is a part of his responsibility of bringing the tribe together, preserving the tribe, making sure that they get through the experience of the Europeans coming. By the age of 20, Black Elk has become a healer, becomes a very important spiritual figure, and has a lot of rather interesting experiences in his life. He was cousin to Crazy Horse, so a well-known Native American. He was at Little Bighorn, Custer's Last Stand, with Sitting Bull. He was at Wounded Knee, that we'll talk about on Thursday. So some very important historical moments, connections there. In a couple of editions of Black Elk Speaks, there are copies of Black Elk's actual drawings of his visions. Right? So just kind of give you an idea. These are productions, artwork meant to demonstrate his vision. Questions about the Lakota? All right, let's move then in our examination here to Aborigines in Australia. The term Aboriginal refers to the indigenous peoples of Australia that had very little contact with the outside world prior to the British coming in the late 18th century. And so this is a very long history. Let's get here a little bit. Oops, that's the wrong way. That's the wrong one. Yeah. All right. So Aboriginal, long history. No single deity that is that prominent, but what's very important is this notion of dream time. Dream time refers to this kind of primordial period when the ancestors, when other spiritual beings shape the world. It's kind of a memory of what history was like before history. It's an explanation. It's a series of myths that talk about how different mountains developed, how the ancestors created certain lakes. And these cycles of stories are referred to as dream time tracks. And they're meant to kind of lay out the history of these people. And so the belief is that ancestors, as animals, as people, created certain geographic features that did not exist. So their actions are believed to be imprinted on the land. We've already talked about totemism, but within Australia, it is very extensive. There are over 500 different totems in Australia. And they, again, shape a wide variety of aspects of life. Often the totems also connect one to the ancestors. So it's not just about the present, it's about the past as well. Also very important is that rites of passage, particularly of puberty, when you are initiated into the secret societies of men and women, which has certain responsibilities. Evidently, it's also about interactions between men and women, but it's also connected with notions of power that are believed to be carried by each of the two sexes. I want to end today with something that we'll pick up with on Thursday. I don't think we can overestimate how important the experience of colonization was to indigenous traditions. And a way to see this is to note how a particular practice developed with the change of these societies. And particularly I'm talking about the Lakota Sundance. We have good record of what the Sundance was like prior to colonization and then also after. And I think that helps us understand how colonization impacted these indigenous societies. So here's a picture of a performance of the Sundance, an artistic representation. These are people hanging here, by the way. The Sundance involved a couple of different things in preparation. It would be held usually once a year, but could be held up to 4 times a year. It would involve the building of a lodge, represented in these two pictures. Now, a place to hold the Sundance, some smaller, some larger, usually in the middle of the lodge, as you can see in this picture to the right at the top, there would be a setting up of a sacred pole. Usually it would be from a cottonwood tree, and the certain members of the tribe would go out and attack the tree as if it were an enemy, ritualistically cut it down, bring it back, set it up as the sacred pole. Once that was set up, the Sundance was ready to be performed, and so those that were chosen to be dancers would attach themselves by skewering their flesh with bone or with stick, and then attach themselves with leather strips to a couple of different things. Some people were actually attached to the sun pole. Others might be in like a square of smaller poles. Others might dance with this skewer attached to a buffalo skull. Others might have a leather strip attached to a horse's tail, and then the horse would be whipped up and to go and run off. And you would hang, you would attach yourself until your flesh would rip. Which now brings us back to this picture. All right, those people are not dead, but are participating in Sundance. As you can see, several of them dragging buffalo skulls or other types of animals. What's it all about? What is this all about? Well, in the classic version of the Sundance before colonization, there are a couple of things that we can draw out of what records we have. First of all, it appears to have been a very communal thing. Those people that would choose to participate in this, would do so because they would take vows related to the strength of the community. Right? That they would help the community get through famine, right? Provide the community food. Or they would, they're vowing to help the community be successful in warfare. And so a lot of it was connected to the physical aspects of the community, right? Making sure it survived. Also connected, of course, with notions of suffering and torture. It was a demonstration of they could take anything their enemies could dish out. But the Sundance, in the classic form, was also about a redistribution of wealth. Not only did you choose to participate, you had to pay to participate. And so your family or you yourself were expected to help support the vow, particularly financially. Now, largely that's through physical objects, not through money, but through food and through clothing or something like that. And so the family was expected to provide something as payment for the dance, which would then be given to less fortunate members of the community. On Thursday, we'll see how this dance changed and modified, first with colonization, but then also with some changes in the United States. Any questions right now before we close? All right, so we'll pick up on Thursday, looking at Indigenous.